trade war is an economic conflict between countries. This results in both countries imposing trade protectionist policies against one another in the form of trade barriers. These barriers can be imposed in a number of different ways, including but not limited to tariffs, import quotas, domestic subsidies, currency devaluation, and embargoes. As each country imposes a trade barrier, the other country will retaliate with another policy. This creates the warring concept. Trade wars often start when a country's government believes that another country is engaging in unfair trading practices that are hurting the first country's markets. In an attempt to protect their domestic industry or create jobs, they may impose a trade barrier, such as a tariff on a key product imported from the other country. The other country may retaliate, and this tit-for-tat battle will escalate into a trade war. A trade war. U.S. President Donald Trump promised during his 2016 presidential campaign to reduce the large trade deficit with China, which he claimed was based in large part on unfair Chinese trading practices, including intellectual property theft, forced technology transfer, lack of market access for American companies in China, and an unlevel playing field caused by Beijing's subsidies for favored Chinese companies. China, meanwhile, believes the US is trying to restrict its rise as a global economic power. The US-China trade war started on 6 July 2018, when the US imposed a 25% tariff on $34 billion of Chinese imports, the first in a series of tariffs imposed during 2018 and 2019. It continued to escalate, with the US and China imposing various import tariffs on each other's products until an agreement in principle on a Phase 1 trade deal was reached in mid-December 2019. The Phase 1 trade deal was formally signed on 15 January 2020, with its provisions taking effect on 15 February 2020. US President Trump and China's chief negotiator, Vice Premier Liu He, signed the Phase 1 trade deal at the White House on 15 January 2020. As part of the deal, China agreed to buy an additional $200 billion of American goods and services over the following 2 years. Those additional purchases would be made up of around $77 billion in manufacturing, $52 billion in energy, $32 billion in agricultural goods, and $38 billion in services. The latter includes tourism, financial services, and cloud services. China also pledged to remove barriers to a long list of US exports, including beef, pork, poultry, seafood, dairy, rice, infant formula, animal feed, and biotechnology, Trump said. The deal also resulted in the US suspending a new 15% tariff planned for December 15 on around $162 billion of Chinese goods, with an existing 15% duty on imports worth around $110 billion halved to 7.5%. China also suspended retaliatory tariffs scheduled for that day. US tariffs on China have made other players more competitive in the US market and led to a trade diversion effect. Of the $35 billion Chinese export losses in the US market, about 63% was diverted to other countries, while the remainder of $14 billion was either lost or captured by US producers. According to the report, US tariffs on China resulted in Taiwan, province of China, gaining $4.2 billion in additional exports to the US in the first half of 2019 by selling more office machinery and communication equipment. Mexico increased its exports to the US by $3.5 billion, mostly in the agri-food, transport equipment, and electrical machinery sectors. The European Union gained about $2.7 billion due to increased exports, largely in the machineries sectors. Vietnam's exports to the US swelled by $2.6 billion, driven by trade in communication equipment and furniture. Trade diversion benefits to Korea, Canada and India were smaller but still substantial, ranging from $0.9 billion to $1.5 billion. The remainder of the benefits were largely to the advantage of other Southeast Asian countries. Trade diversion effects favoring African countries have been minimal.